Thank you for joining us today at Miniature Wargaming Labs. Today we're going to go over how I painted my Mutant from my new Fallout box set. So I painted all the mutants at once, but I'll show you how I did this guy on camera. Now, my favorite part was the metal armor, and to do that, I started off with lead belcher as my base. Did a heavy wash or glaze of Jacquera orange all over the metal as the rust, the corrosion, then highlighted back with Runefang steel, then washed it all with Seraphim sepia. Now if we look at some of his tattered clothes here, that was Mornfang brown, so dark brown, highlighted with a lighter brown, XV88, washed with Nuln oil. The little bits of rope you can see hold up his clothes and his plate mail. That was just a khaki color. In this case, P3's Menoth white base, once again washed with Nuln oil. And the skin, that was a base of wall flesh, then Elysian green, washed with, you guessed it, Nuln oil. You see a lot of the straps that hold up his armor, some of his bits there. I just painted that black for the weapons and some of the armor straps. The base was standard Mechanicus gray, and for the asphalt I darkened it down with a mix of Abaddon black and Nuln oil. For the sidewalk I would just highlight with ash gray to bring that up. The block of wood is once again XV88, and the dirt pile is Bugman's Glow. And what I did, and I do for all my post-apocalyptic models, is German Camouflage Beige World War II by Vallejo. I just dry brushed that everywhere to show how the grit and grime of the post-apocalyptic future just covers him. So let's go ahead and get started with this guy. With our model primed standard Mechanicus gray by Games Workshop, we're going to go ahead and start painting. And to lead off, I'm going to use some lead belcher on this model to paint these armor plates. Now at this stage, neatness doesn't count, so I'm just going to grab a messed up brush and start slopping this on wherever there's some of this ruined metal armor. Now we've painted all our metal bits, so what we want to do is I chose a darker metal, so the lead belcher. This is going to be the first layer. Next I want to add some corrosion. To do that, I'm going to take some Jacquera orange. So this is a dull orange. I've also used like Fire Slayer orange or bright orange. So you just got to think about what type of corrosion you want to put on the material. So I'm going to put a little bit in this dish, and then I'm going to take some water out of a receptacle there, and I'm going to thin it down into a glaze. So what I'm doing is I'm mixing the water into it, and then I take my mixer, I pull it up the side, and I check the viscosity. So how much does it run down? So I want something thicker than a wash, but thinner than a paint, because I really want it to cling inside the grooves of the metal. Get that corrosion look. So let me take my sloppy brush again, and I'm just going to hit that all around the miniature. So you can see it's already gathering in the grooves of this plate right there. And then we're going to let this guy sit for a while. It's going to take a while for that to dry, and you can't do the next step until it's absolutely dry. You also use a hair dryer. That tends to push the liquid around. I don't want to do that. Alright, we're going to let this guy dry for a while. So our Jokero orange heavy, slop on of some watered down paint is finally dried. And so we're looking at this, and first instinct is just to dry brush. And that would just leave the orange down in the recesses of the plates that you see here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some lead belcher. We used it earlier. And I'm going to take some foam, and I'm going to cut out a tiny little square from it. So I was working on my bolt-action Japanese for World War II, and a lot of miniatures are packed in this foam, and I used some scissors and cut out a tiny piece of foam. And now I'm going to take my lead belcher, going to take my little square here, maybe I made it a little too small, and I'm going to curve it until it forms like a little ball shape right there. And I'm going to just slightly dip it into the paint, like that. And I'm going to rub most of it out on a sheet of paper that's off camera, just as I would a dry brush. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to attack these armor plates. And what this allows you to do better than I feel a dry brush can do is you can actually control how much paint you stipple on. So it gives you the effect that the rust is bubbling up and through the plate itself. Or you can just do like a dry brush here and rub it side to side. We're going to see on that shoulder pad. And this allows some of the orange to peek through even on raised surfaces. And give it a heavy corroded look. So let's look at that little plate right there. So you can see we've got a vein of rust even running through the flat surface there because we're only stippling on the plate, so it's not hitting all of it. And that's the kind of look I'm going for, a worn down plate. Now it is a little bit more time consuming. Dry brushing will be faster, but I like the effect it creates. So once I'm done going around this model, we'll be back. Now that I've finished stippling the lead belcher over the orange, I'm going to take some Rune Fang steel. It's probably an unnecessary touch, but I think it'll add something before I wash the model. So I'm not going to do a lot of work here. I'm just going to spot highlight and dab. You could probably also just dry brush some of the raised surfaces. And here I'll just like randomly touch parts of the plate. And what this does is it gives a more, diffuses the appearance of the light bouncing off the plate. So I'll hit some of these ringlets. And seeing that's starting to brighten it up. So we're going to put layers on here. And we want to focus on the idea that the light is coming down. So you can put as much silver on as you want to brighten up your plate, because it's your model. Do what you want. So I finished spot treating silver all over the model, and now I'm preparing to wash it. And it's going to be a heavy wash of Seraphim Sepia. I like the dirty look it normally gives to metal plating. So I'm going to take a brush that I've messed up in the past, get it a little wet. I'm just going to dunk it in there, and we're going to slime this model with it. And since we're not interested in doing the whole model, we're just interested in hitting the plates, but neatness doesn't count in this state yet. Alright, and that darkened it up. So we're going to let this dry for a while, and then we'll be back. So our wash has now dried, and I'm ready to move on to the next thing, which is I'm going to do his tattered fabrics around the model here. For that, I'm going to use Mornfang Brown. I want to keep dark colors going throughout him, because I think he's more of an autumn. I just want to make, this type of brown, if it actually touched the plate, I wouldn't be too worried. Plate's pretty dark there. And notice he's got a little half-torn shirt up through here. So now, got the now that I have the brown blocked in, I want to move on to his skin. And for his skin, I'm going to start with a wall flesh. Now here I've got to start being more careful as I start finish blocking him in. And don't forget his toes. The next step is we're going to paint a bunch of the little ropes that he has holding his pants up and holding his armor together. And for that, I'm going to use a khaki color, in this case P3's Meneth white base. So I'm going to make sure to use a fine tip brush. And I'm just going to run it along the top of the little ropes. And then he has his pants. The little rope up here. Just want to pull out the details from the knots. And he has little ropes that hold down and hold some of these plates in place. So we'll spin this model around and start finishing this detail here. The next step will be to finish painting up his skin. For that, I'm going to use Elysian green. So the purpose of the wall of flesh was just to serve as a base for the Elysian green to ride on top of. And we'll just go around the model, picking out all the exposed head, arms, and legs. Now we're going to pick out the details in his clothing, and we're going to use some XV88 for that. So we're not going to need much of this, because we're going to just take little swipes and just hit the top parts where you'd see the folds in the clothing. So a little swipe right there, just something to show that there's a difference between the high peaks of his clothes and the low valleys of the folds. Next, we'll use Abaddon Black to pick out the black bits of the model. And primarily what we're talking about here is the big gun he's carrying. We're going to get this, looks like a nightstick or a Tonfa Baltimore bomber. And I'm also going to do his straps that hold his armor plate up. So he's got two straps. that hold up his chest plate. So we'll get those. There's also this strap right here on his arm guard. And we'll start blocking in his weapon. Now I want to touch and clean up the base here, because I've got other colors on there. So I'm going to take out my standard Mechanicus gray and go back over that. I don't need one of my nice brushes. I can take one that I've just beat up in the past, and we'll get this all back down to my original color, making sure not to touch the feet. Now when we look at this base, we can see that there's some rubble around. There's like a little dirt pile and a piece of wood. So for just the dirt pile, I'm going to take some Bugman's Glow. I'm going to take one of my sloppy brushes and just try to fill in where I see the dirt. Now, notice there's a little piece of wood right there. I think I'll go back to my XV88. And since it's a more linear structured object, I'll go back to my fine tip brush. And we'll just pick out around here. Now we'll go let that dry. Now for the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to take some Nuln Oil and everything but the metal plates, we're going to put a light little touch on there. So that's going to be the green skin and the cloth we just did. I'm going to try to avoid the plates, but if you hit them, that's fine. It's not going to hurt the model. I just wanted different tones between the metal and the cloth. Well, you can see right there that's actually adding a lot of texture to the model. And once we're done doing this, we're going to have to let this sit for a while. Or we can use a hairdryer. The issue with the hairdryer is pushing the Nuln Oil around after you've gotten it in a place you want it. Now looking at the base, what I did is I could tell that this is a city scene, this is a sidewalk, pile of dirt, 2x4, brick, and this is asphalt. So I put more coats of the Nuln Oil down on the asphalt there to give it a variation. So some parts are darker than others, but this is a sidewalk and it looks a little too dark for me. So I took some ash gray, already put it in my palette here, and I'm just going to lighten up some of this sidewalk. Because the sidewalk is actually really textured with a lot of cracks. I'm happy with that. So it looks like no one's maintained it in the apocalypse, or it's located somewhere in Brooklyn. I'll just smear some of that around. Now for the last step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some German camouflage beige, World War II. And this is from Vallejo, and I like to use it as a dust, kind of like a weathering powder. And that's just to show a bit of griminess on it. So I'm going to take my dry brush, just put a little bit on there. I got a piece of paper, I'm going to rub most of it off. Then I'm going to start texturing the base with it. Just start dry brushing over everything. And this will really pop out the detail I like in the sidewalk. And on the asphalt, don't want the asphalt looking too clean. Then what I start doing is I start dry brushing this on the model. And I like the effect this has on the green, and toning down the skin, and add some dust, because I want to look like these guys have been walking through the apocalypse landscape, and they're picking up pieces of the environment. Alright, I think that's enough there. So there's my mutant for Fallout. I'll call that a day. One thing I'll probably do is I like to trim my bases. Probably do this one in black. I'll do that later. So thank you for joining us at Miniature Wargaming Labs. And we'll see you next time.